By dawn, the Oak River Police Department no longer looked like a place meant to protect anyone. Yellow tape stretched across the front steps, sagging under its own weight, fluttering weakly in the early morning breeze. The glass doors were cracked, one pane completely shattered, shards still scattered across the concrete like frozen splashes of water. Red and blue lights continued to pulse long after they were needed, their reflections bouncing off broken windows, patrol cars, and the stunned faces of officers standing idle in the parking lot. No sirens, no shouting. Just the low hum of generators and the unmistakable feeling that something irreversible had already happened. Local news vans arrived before most of the town had finished its first cup of coffee. Federal authorities have launched an investigation into the Oak River Police Department. One reporter said into a microphone, her voice carefully neutral. Details are limited at this time. Limited was an understatement. No one would say what triggered it. No official statements. No timeline. Just phrases whispered between officers and repeated under breath. Internal review, federal oversight, pending inquiry. The kind of words that don't end careers by themselves, but always arrive right before everything collapses. Inside the building, the air smelled like disinfectant and cold metal. A desk had been overturned in the booking area. A wall clock hung crooked, stopped at a time no one could remember setting. Someone had tried to mop the floor, but the stains refused to disappear completely. In the holding area, a uniform lay folded on a bench. No name, no badge attached, just fabric abandoned. Out back, an officer sat on the curb with his hands cuffed behind him. His posture was rigid, jaw clenched so tight it trembled. He stared straight ahead, refusing to look at anyone, as if eye contact itself could make things worse. No one spoke to him. No one needed to. The cuffs said everything words could not. Across the lot, a black SUV waited with its engine running. A woman stepped out of the building and paused under the pale morning sky. She was black, mid-50s, dressed plainly now. No insignia visible, no symbols of rank. Just a calm presence moving through chaos without reacting to it. Her expression gave nothing away. Not anger, not relief, not triumph. An agent opened the door for her. She nodded once and climbed inside. No one stopped her. No one asked her name. As the vehicle pulled away, an officer near the entrance finally broke the silence. Who was she? He asked quietly. The sergeant beside him shook his head. Doesn't matter, he said. Whatever happened in that building last night ended a lot of things. The news cycle filled in the blanks with speculation. A wrongful arrest. A procedural violation, a conflict of authority. Commentators argued in tidy sound bites, none of them close to the truth, because the truth was harder to explain. It wasn't a shootout. There were no flashing headlines about violence, no dramatic chase. It was smaller than that. It was a decision made quickly, confidently. A judgment passed without hesitation, the kind of assumption people make every day when they believe the system is on their side. Somewhere inside that station, someone had decided they already knew the whole story. By noon, the department's phone stopped ringing altogether. By evening, officers were told to go home early. By nightfall, federal seals appeared on office doors, and computers were carted out under supervision. Careers unraveled quietly. Reputations didn't scream when they broke. They just vanished. The woman never looked back as the SUV merged onto the highway. She rested her hands in her lap, steady, composed, carrying the weight of something far larger than what anyone in Oak River could understand. She had walked out of that building without raising her voice, without demanding an apology, without explaining herself. She didn't need to, because by the time the sun rose, the damage was already done. One small assumption made with absolute confidence had dismantled everything that followed. The rain had been falling since sunset, the kind that turned Georgia highways into long ribbons of glare and shadow. It pressed down on the windshield in steady sheets, blurring taillights into red smears and swallowing the edges of the road. The night felt heavier because of it, quieter, as if everything outside the car had decided to keep its distance. Evelyn Carter drove alone. She sat upright behind the wheel, both hands steady, eyes forward. Her shoulders ached from a 14-hour day of briefings and meetings that never quite ended when they were supposed to. Her phone buzzed once in the center console, and she ignored it. Whatever it was could wait. All she wanted now was to reach her temporary apartment, kick off her shoes, and let the silence do its work. She wore a simple coat over a pressed white shirt. No visible insignia, no signs of rank. That had been intentional. Tonight was not about authority or command. Tonight was about getting home without attracting attention. Evelyn had learned long ago that attention came with a cost. The road narrowed as she passed through Oak River, a town that announced itself with a flickering welcome sign and a gas station that never seemed to close. Her speed stayed locked at the limit. She signaled early, every movement precise, habitual, automatic. She had spent a lifetime learning that discipline was often mistaken for guilt if you were the wrong person in the wrong place. A few miles back, another car had been moving in the opposite direction. Officer Derek Walsh had been on shift for nearly 6 hours, parked at an angle near the edge of Route 9, watching traffic slide past like slow-moving targets. The rain had kept things quiet. No calls, no noise complaints, no action. His coffee had gone cold half. An hour earlier, and his patience with the night was thinning. Derek liked nights like this. Fewer supervisors, fewer eyes, less interference. He leaned back in his seat, one hand resting near the radio, the other tapping against the steering wheel. He believed in instinct, trusted it more than procedure. That belief had served him well, at least in his own mind. Every stop he made reinforced the same lesson. Confidence kept people compliant. Hesitation invited problems. When he saw the car, it stood out immediately. Dark, clean, expensive. It moved smoothly through the rain, hugging the center of the lane. Derek watched it pass, his eyes narrowing. He did not see a tired driver coming off a long day. He did not see careful hands on the wheel or a woman who wanted nothing more than to be left alone. He saw something that did not fit, luxury where he did not expect it, calm where he believed there should be nerves. A black woman alone in a town that rarely saw cars like that driven by people like her. He turned the cruiser around without thinking. In his mind, the narrative had already formed. He had done this before, plenty of times. He told himself the law gave him room to ask questions, to check, to verify. He told himself he was protecting the road. Mostly, he told himself he was right. The lights came on behind Evelyn without warning. Red and blue cut through the rain, flashing across her mirrors and flooding the inside of her car with color. She felt the familiar tightening in her chest, not panic, but resignation. She checked her speed again. Still perfect. She signaled, slowed, and pulled over onto the shoulder with care. Inside the cruiser, Derek watched her every move. See, he thought she knows she messed up. Evelyn turned off the engine and rolled down the window halfway. She placed her hands on the steering wheel where they could be seen. The rain soaked the shoulder of the road, splashing against her tires. Derek stepped out, adjusting his jacket as he approached. His boots crunched against gravel. He felt steady, in control. This was his space, his moment. License and registration, he said. His tone was flat, practiced, already carrying the weight of authority. Of course, Evelyn replied. Her voice was calm, even friendly. She reached slowly for her purse. Is there a reason for the stop, officer? Derek did not answer the question. He glanced into the back seat instead, then back at her hands. Just routine, he said. You were drifting. That was not true. Evelyn knew it. Derek knew it too. But truth was flexible when confidence filled the gaps. I am happy to cooperate. Evelyn said I would just like to understand. Derek straightened. Step out of the vehicle, he said. For the first time that night, something shifted. Evelyn paused, not out of defiance, but calculation. She had learned when to speak and when to wait. Officer, she said carefully, I do not believe I have done anything wrong. I can provide my documents right here. Derek heard the words, but not the meaning. In his mind, cooperation meant obedience. Anything else felt like resistance. His hand moved closer to his belt. He felt the familiar surge of certainty rise in his chest, the kind that told him he was in charge, that the badge made his decisions unquestionable. Behind him, the rain kept falling. Above them, the road stayed empty. And in that moment, as the red and blue lights pulsed against the wet pavement, Derek Walsh believed completely that he had control of the situation. He did not yet understand how fragile that belief was. Derek Walsh felt the moment slip before he understood it. It did not arrive as anger. It arrived as certainty. Standing in the rain, framed by the glare of his cruiser lights, he felt the quiet pressure that had followed him since the start of his career, the unspoken demand to prove himself, to show that he belonged in the uniform, to demonstrate control in a job that rewarded decisiveness and punished hesitation. He had grown up hearing the same stories over and over. If you act confident, people fall in line. If you question yourself, they sense weakness. The badge did not just grant authority, it demanded that you use it. And Derek had learned to use it quickly. He looked at Evelyn Carter and saw a problem he believed he could solve, not because she was doing anything wrong, but because she was doing nothing wrong in a way that unsettled him. Her calm did not feel respectful. It felt deliberate, as if she were measuring him instead of the other way around. That bothered him more than resistance ever could. "You need to step out of the vehicle," he said again. This time, slower, his voice firmer. Evelyn kept her hands where they were. She met his eyes without challenging him. "Officer," she said quietly, "I am trying to cooperate. I just want to be clear about what is happening." Derek did not hear cooperation. He heard delay. He glanced at the car again, at the clean interior, the careful way everything was placed. Nothing loose. Nothing chaotic. That should have reassured him. Instead, it fed the voice in his head that whispered she was too composed. People like that always think they are above you, the voice said. The rain soaked through his jacket collar. He shifted his weight, annoyed by the discomfort, annoyed that the night was no longer simple. What he did not do was run her information. He did not call it in. He did not step back and let the process slow him down. Slowing down meant doubt, and doubt meant losing control. He had been trained better than this. He knew the steps, but training had long ago taken a back seat to instinct, and instinct told him he was right. Evelyn felt the calculation happening in front of her. She had seen it before in different uniforms in different places. The moment when a situation hardened, not because of facts, but because of pride. She understood the danger of misreading him just as clearly as he was misreading her. If she asserted herself too strongly, he would hear defiance. If she stayed too quiet, he would interpret submission and push further. There was no safe lane between those 2 points. "Officer," she said carefully, "I am not refusing. I am asking for clarification." Derek exhaled sharply. "You are making this more difficult than it needs to be," he said. That was when she realized the decision was no longer hers. The badge had taken over. In Derek's mind, the line had already been crossed not by action, but by assumption. He assumed control meant escalation. He assumed compliance could be forced. He assumed the system would protect him because it always had. He did not ask himself why a woman alone on a rain-soaked highway would remain this calm. He did not ask what kind of life trained that kind of stillness. He did not ask who she might be beyond the story he had already written. He told himself he was being decisive. He told himself he was preventing a problem. He told himself the law was on his side. Evelyn watched his posture change, his shoulders square, his jaw tighten. She felt the moment settle like a weight in her chest. This is the point, she thought, where everything tilts. When Derek reached for his cuffs, it did not feel dramatic. It felt procedural, ordinary, almost quiet. No one raised their voice. No one ran. But the road behind them remained empty, and the rain kept falling as if it knew what was coming. And with that small, confident movement, the night took a direction that could not be undone. The sound of the cuffs was softer than Evelyn expected. Not a snap, not a clang, just a dull metallic click that blended into the rain and disappeared almost as soon as it happened. If someone had been driving past at that moment, they would not have noticed anything unusual. Just another stop on a dark road. Just another officer doing his job. That ordinariness was what made it dangerous. Derek stepped closer, careful now, controlled. In his mind, the decision had already justified itself. He was no longer reacting. He was executing that. Distinction mattered to him more than the truth ever could. "Turn around," he said. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Evelyn obeyed. Not because she agreed, not because she was afraid, but because she understood the cost of forcing a different outcome. She turned slowly, deliberately, every movement chosen to signal compliance without surrendering her dignity. Inside, something burned. She thought of the meetings she had left only an hour earlier. Rooms filled with men who argued loudly and postured endlessly, but knew when to listen. Men who understood that authority without restraint was a liability. She thought of how carefully power had always been rationed around her. Questioned, challenged, never assumed. Out here, none of that mattered. Derek's world was smaller, simpler. He had learned that hesitation invited scrutiny, and scrutiny threatened his standing. Tonight, he needed the stop to end with clarity, with dominance, with a clear outcome he could explain later in a report. Without flinching, he told himself she would thank him once things settled. "You keep acting like this is optional," he said. As he positioned her near the rear of the car, Evelyn said nothing. She focused on her breathing, slow and even. She had been trained for moments when fear tried to seize control. This was not fear. This was something colder, a realization that the person behind her was no longer listening for truth. He was listening for compliance. Derek did not check her wallet when she offered it. He glanced at it and dismissed it as noise. He did not radio his supervisor, even though the situation had clearly escalated beyond routine. He did not ask himself why a driver with nothing to hide would still speak with such careful restraint. Those questions would have slowed him down, and slowing down meant admitting that confidence alone might not be enough. The cuffs closed around her wrists. Not violently, not gently either, just tight enough to be unquestionable. Evelyn felt the pressure and swallowed the instinct to react. She knew how easily reaction could be rewritten as resistance. "Officer," she said, her voice low, steady. "This is a mistake." Derek exhaled through his nose. That word again, he thought. Mistake implied error, and error implied accountability. He had no room for either. He had already decided how this would look on paper. "You should have thought about that before making this complicated," he replied. In that moment, he was not thinking about the woman in front of him. He was thinking about the version of himself he needed to be. The officer who took charge, the one who did not hesitate, the one who would never be questioned by anyone who mattered. He believed the badge would carry the weight for him. Evelyn felt the rain soak through her coat as she stood there, restrained and silent. She understood now that the choice had already been made, not by her actions, but by his certainty. She had not lost control of the situation. Control had never been hers to begin with. What made it unbearable was how ordinary it all felt. No shouting, no crowd, no clear villain. Just two people on the side of a road and a system that rewarded confidence over caution. Derek guided her toward the cruiser, already mentally drafting his report. He would keep it clean, simple, professional. He would not mention the pause, or the questions he chose not to hear, or the documents he never really looked at. By the time the door closed behind her, the decision had settled into place like wet cement. The road behind them remained empty. The rain kept falling, and somewhere beneath the hum of the engine and the quiet click of a locked door, the consequences began to take shape. The holding room was colder than Evelyn expected, not because of the temperature, but because of the way people moved through it. Conversations dropped when she was guided past. Eyes lingered just long enough to judge, then slid away as if she were something inconvenient left out in the open. She was not treated like a threat. She was treated like a problem, the kind that disrupted a routine night and demanded paperwork no one wanted to complete. She was seated on a metal bench near the wall. No explanation, no timeline, just wait. An officer took her belongings without looking at her face. Another scribbled notes on a clipboard, pausing only to sigh when asked a question. The small indignities stacked quietly, one on top of the other. No raised voices, no overt hostility, just a steady erosion of respect. Evelyn felt it settle in her chest. This was not fear. This was humiliation. The controlled kind. The kind that asked you to swallow your anger because expressing it would only confirm what they already believed about you. She kept her posture straight, hands folded, eyes forward. Years of discipline held the line where emotion threatened to leak through. She had commanded rooms filled with people twice as powerful as anyone in this building. Yet here she was, reduced to a case number and an inconvenience. Time stretched. Minutes lost their shape. The ticking clock on the wall grew louder with every passing moment. The silence was not peaceful. It pressed down, thick and watchful. Evelyn could feel the weight of unspoken assumptions filling the room. She knew what they saw. A woman who did not fit their expectations. Someone who had dared to question the flow of authority. Across the room, two officers spoke in low voices. "Something feels off." One of them muttered. The other shrugged. "Keep your head down. It is not our stop." That was the rule. Everyone knew it. Do not challenge a fellow officer unless you want trouble, especially not on a night shift. Especially not when the paperwork had already started. Derek stood near the booking desk, arms crossed. He watched Evelyn from a distance, irritation creeping in around the edges of his confidence. He did not like how calm she remained. He did not like that she had not cried or protested or begged. People were supposed to react when you put them in that position. Her silence felt like an accusation. He checked his watch again. The delay was annoying. He wanted this wrapped up, filed, forgotten. But the longer it dragged on, the more he felt eyes on him. Not accusing, just curious. That curiosity made him defensive. He told himself it was normal. Processing took time. She had complicated things by asking questions, by not acting the way he expected. She brought this on herself, he thought. Still, a flicker of doubt brushed against him when he saw another officer glance at the paperwork, then back at Evelyn, then away again. No one said anything, but the hesitation was there. Evelyn noticed it too. She saw the uncertainty in their movements. The way one officer paused before closing a drawer. The way another avoided her gaze entirely. She understood what it meant. Someone sensed a mistake, but sensing was not the same as acting. The system rewarded silence. The longer she sat there, the more the room seemed to close in. Not physically, but psychologically. Waiting without answers had a way of amplifying everything. The ticking clock, the scrape of boots on tile, the low murmur of radios crackling with calls that had nothing to do with her. This is how it happens, she thought, not with violence, with waiting. Derek cleared his throat and turned away, pretending to focus on his report. He typed harder than necessary, fingers striking the keys with a sharp rhythm. Every line he wrote reinforced his version of events. The more he committed it to paper, the harder it became to imagine he could be wrong. Confidence, once written down, had weight. Evelyn remained seated, composed, carrying the quiet burden of knowing that the first consequence had already arrived. Not punishment, not resolution, just doubt. And the heavy realization that no one in that room was ready to stop what was unfolding. The hours did not announce themselves as they passed. They slipped by. Quietly, marked only by the dull buzz of fluorescent lights and the occasional scrape of a chair against tile. The room seemed designed to erase time, to make waiting feel endless and ordinary at the same time. Evelyn remained where they left her. No one told her how long she would be there. No one explained the next step. She existed in a kind of administrative limbo, neither charged nor released, simply held in place by inertia and indifference. Each unanswered minute felt heavier than the last. She shifted once on the bench and immediately felt eyes on her. Not concern, surveillance, as if movement itself needed justification. She stilled again, jaw tightening, forcing her breathing to remain slow and even. This was the part that cut deepest, not the cuffs, not the accusation, but the way dignity was quietly rationed, handed out only to those deemed worthy of it. At the booking desk, Derek glanced at the clock again. His irritation had hardened into something sharper. The calm, expected to return once the stop was over, never came. Instead, a restless energy followed him, clinging to his thoughts. Why is she still so composed? He wondered. He told himself it did not matter. People processed stress differently. He had done nothing wrong. Still, the silence gnawed at him. It made room for questions he did not want to answer. Another officer approached him quietly. Low voice, careful tone. "You sure about this one, Derek?" Derek did not look up. "I am sure," he said flatly. The officer hesitated, just for a second. That hesitation was the closest thing to dissent Derek would hear all night. "Okay then," the officer replied, backing away. That was how accountability dissolved, not with arguments, but with retreat. Evelyn watched the exchange from across the room. She caught the hesitation, the uncertainty. It confirmed what she already knew. Doubt existed here. It simply had no power. She felt the heat of restrained anger rise in her chest and forced it back down. This was not the moment. She could not afford to lose control even though control had been taken from her. Any display of frustration would be catalogued and weaponized. So she waited. Her thoughts drifted not to herself, but to the pattern. To how easily a situation like this could unfold for someone without options, without resources, without a lifetime of discipline to fall back on. She recognized the machinery at work and felt the quiet grief of knowing how often it ran unchecked. Derek finished typing and printed the report. He skimmed it once, nodded to himself, and set it aside. Seeing the words in black and white gave him comfort. Documentation felt like truth, even when it was not. He walked past Evelyn without meeting her eyes. She felt the dismissal like a physical thing. As the silence stretched on, the room grew tense in a way no one could quite name. The air felt charged, as if something were waiting just beyond the edge of awareness. The officers moved more carefully now. Conversations stayed hushed. Radios were turned down. Time was no longer neutral. It was pressing in. Evelyn lifted her gaze to the clock again. Still no answers. Just waiting. Just the quiet accumulation of consequence. Somewhere deep inside the building, a line had already been crossed. No alarms had sounded. No one had shouted. But the damage was spreading all the same. And everyone in that room felt it, even if no one dared to say it out loud. The phone sat on the wall between the holding area and the booking desk, its plastic surface dulled by years of use. It looked ordinary, almost forgotten, the kind of object no one paid attention to until it rang. Evelyn stood in front of it quietly. She did not rush. She did not demand anything. When she spoke, her voice was even, controlled, stripped of emotion. "I would like to make a phone call, please." The officer nearest to her hesitated. He glanced at Derek, then back at Evelyn. Procedure said she was entitled to one. Instinct said delay. Delay was safer. Delay kept responsibility at arm's length. Derek sighed. "Fine," he said. "Make it quick." He expected a lawyer or a family member, someone who would panic or plead or ask what to do next. That was how these calls usually went. Evelyn picked up the receiver. She did not raise her voice. She did not lower it either. She spoke with the calm precision of someone used to being heard without repetition. "This is Evelyn Carter," she said. "I need to report an incident involving a traffic stop and extended detention. I am requesting guidance on next steps." There was a pause on the other end. Not confusion, recognition. Derek leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. He watched her lips move, listened for signs of bluffing. There were none. No threats. No names dropped. No leverage exposed. That unsettled him. "Who are you calling?" He asked impatiently. Evelyn covered the receiver gently. "Someone who can answer questions," she replied. The line went quiet again. Longer this time. "Yes, Evelyn." Continued. "Measured, I understand." "Thank you." She hung up and placed the phone back where it belonged. That was all. No drama, no warning shot. Just a single call placed with intent. Within minutes, the atmosphere began to change. It started small. A radio crackled with a request that did not follow the usual tone. An officer paused mid-sentence and looked up sharply. Another checked his screen twice as if making sure he read it correctly. Derek felt it before he understood it. The room grew tense in a way that had nothing to do with Evelyn anymore. The noise level dropped. Movement became cautious. Eyes flicked toward doors and radios instead of her. Someone asked for a supervisor. Someone else asked which shift captain was on call. Evelyn remained where she was, hands folded, expression unreadable. She did not watch the reaction spread. She did not need to. She had seen this pattern before. The moment when a local decision brushes against a larger system and the smaller one realizes it is no longer alone. Derek straightened. "What is going on?" He asked no one in particular. An officer near the desk cleared his throat. "We just got a call," he said carefully. "Someone from outside the department wants clarification on the detention." Derek frowned. "Outside how federal?" he added quietly. The word hung in the air. Federal meant oversight. It meant questions that could not be brushed aside. It meant procedures examined line by line and decisions pulled apart under bright light. Derek felt heat rise in his chest. "This is nothing," he said quickly. "A routine stop." She refused to cooperate. No one responded. Another radio crackled, requesting confirmation of arrest timeline and probable cause. Came the voice, calm, professional, unmistakably not local. Derek's mouth went dry. He walked back to the computer terminal and pulled up the report again. The words he had typed earlier now felt fragile, exposed. He reread the justification for the stop. The phrasing that had seemed solid an hour ago now sounded thin even to him, drifting within lane failure to comply. Those words had always worked before. He glanced toward Evelyn. She sat motionless, eyes forward, not watching him, not engaging. That calm returned like a mirror held too close. It reflected something he did not want to see. The supervisor arrived with a forced smile and tight shoulders. "What do we have?" he asked, already knowing the answer was not going to be simple. Derek spoke first. "Fast. Defensive." He explained the stop, the delay, the attitude. He framed it as resistance masked as politeness. The supervisor nodded, but his eyes kept drifting back to Evelyn. "Ma'am," he said cautiously, "can you confirm your name again?" Evelyn looked up. "Evelyn Carter," she said evenly. The supervisor swallowed. "And your reason for travel tonight?" "Returning from a work engagement," she replied. "I complied with all instructions and requested clarification when necessary. No accusations, no embellishment, just facts." The radio crackled again. "We need copies of all body cam and dash cam footage," immediately the voice said, "along with documentation of supervisor notification." The supervisor stiffened. That had not happened. Derek felt the floor shift beneath him. For the first time that night, fear edged past irritation. Not panic, not yet, but the unmistakable awareness that whatever he thought he controlled had grown larger than him. And it was still growing. The next call did not come through the radio. It came through a line no one in the building used unless something had gone very wrong. The supervisor stepped away to answer it, lowering his voice instinctively, his posture changing the moment he heard who was on the other end. He turned his back to the room, one hand braced against the counter as if the floor beneath him had lost its balance. Derek watched the color drain from his face. "Yes, sir. Understood. Yes, we are cooperating fully." Each response landed like a quiet hammer blow. When the supervisor hung up, he did not turn around right away. He stood there for a moment, staring at the wall, as if gathering himself before facing what he already knew. "We need to secure all recordings," he said. "Finally, no edits, no delays, everything." An officer asked in a low voice, "Is this about civil rights?" The supervisor did not answer directly. "There are questions about procedure," he said, "and about detention without clear, probable cause." That was enough. The room shifted from routine to crisis in a matter of seconds. Officers moved quickly now, but without coordination. Someone started printing files. Someone else tried to locate a missing log entry. A third officer asked where the shift lieutenant was, and no one had an answer. The system was moving, but not in the way Derek was used to. It was no longer protecting him. It was protecting itself. Derek stepped closer to the supervisor. "This is being blown out of proportion," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I followed protocol." The supervisor looked at him for a long moment. "Did you notify anyone when the stop escalated?" Derek hesitated. "I did not think it was necessary. That pause was all it took." The supervisor exhaled slowly. "That decision may have been a mistake." Derek felt a sharp tightness in his chest. "No," he said quickly. "She was being difficult. I handled it." "Handled it" echoed back in his head with a different meaning now. Across the room, Evelyn remained still. She did not interrupt. She did not correct him. She did not need to. The truth was beginning to surface on its own, pulled upward by a system that no longer trusted his version of events. An agent's voice came through the phone again, asking for confirmation of identity. The supervisor asked Evelyn to step closer. "Ma'am, we just need to verify some information." Of course, Evelyn replied. She met his eyes without challenge. She recited her details calmly. Name, employer, clearance level. Each word landed with quiet precision. No emphasis, no flourish. Just truth stated plainly. The supervisor's expression tightened with each confirmation. Derek felt his mouth go dry. He had assumed, confidently, completely, he had assumed the badge was enough. That authority flowed in one direction, that people like her ended at the edge of his jurisdiction. He had not imagined a phone call could travel this far, this fast. The room felt smaller now, the walls closer, the air heavier. Conversations dropped into whispers. Radios were turned down. No one joked. No one leaned casually against the counter anymore. Fear had entered the building. Not fear of Evelyn, fear of what she represented. Federal oversight did not care about intent. It cared about records, timelines, decisions. And Derek's decisions were starting to look isolated, unsupported, exposed. He replayed the stop in his mind, searching for an off-ramp he might have missed, a question he could have asked, a pause he could have taken. There were many. He had ignored all of them. The supervisor cleared his throat. "Derek, you are relieved from duty for the remainder of the shift." Just like that. No argument, no ceremony. Derek stared at him. "What, turn in your equipment and wait in the interview room," the supervisor said. "We need to get through this properly." Properly. The word felt like a verdict. Derek walked past Evelyn without looking at her. He could not bring himself to meet her eyes. The confidence that had carried him through the night had evaporated, leaving behind a hollow pressure that pressed in from all sides. He sat alone in the small room, staring at the blank wall, listening to muffled voices outside. For the first time since the lights came on behind her car, he felt it. Real fear. Not of punishment, but of understanding exactly how badly he had misjudged the moment. Outside the room, the department continued to unravel in quiet, efficient steps. Files gathered, calls escalated, oversight tightened its grip. Evelyn remained composed. She had not raised her voice. She had not threatened anyone. She had simply made a call. And now the system was responding to its own reflection. The truth did not arrive with sirens or raised voices. It arrived quietly, carried by paperwork, phone calls, and the sudden shift in how everyone stood when Evelyn Carter spoke. She was not treated differently because she had power. She was treated differently because people finally understood her responsibility. The clarification came in a low voice from a federal liaison standing just inside the doorway, speaking to Chief Harold Boone with careful precision. Titles were mentioned: scope, oversight, duty of care. Not once did anyone say she outranked them. Not once did anyone frame her as someone untouchable. Instead, they framed her as someone accountable for more than herself. Evelyn listened without interruption. She did not correct them. She did not expand on it. When the liaison finished, she nodded once and returned to her seat. That restraint unsettled the room more than anger ever could have. Chief Boone felt it settle into his bones. He had spent years believing his job was to keep the department running smoothly, to shield his officers from scrutiny when things got messy, to handle problems internally before outsiders complicated them. That instinct had always felt protective, responsible even. Now it felt like negligence. He looked at Derek through the glass of the interview room. The young officer sat rigid, hands clasped together, eyes unfocused. Boone saw something he had missed before. Not malice, not cruelty, but a dangerous certainty that had never been challenged. This did not happen because the wrong person was stopped. Boone realized it happened because no one thought to stop the process itself. The system had allowed confidence to replace verification, speed to replace judgment, loyalty to replace accountability. Derek had not been protected by the badge alone. He had been protected by silence, and Boone had helped build that silence. Derek felt the shift too. He listened to voices outside the room, not angry, measured, procedural. He had expected outrage if things went bad. Accusations, someone yelling his name. Instead, what frightened him was how calm everyone had become. Calm meant review. Review meant facts. Facts did not bend to confidence. He replayed the night again, slower this time, not to justify himself, but to understand where he had gone wrong. He saw the moments clearly now, the questions he did not ask, the documents he dismissed without reading, the supervisor he never called because he believed that doing so would make him look unsure. He had not been wronged. He had been trusted with power and used it carelessly. That realization cut deeper than punishment ever could. Chief Boone stepped into the room. Derek straightened instinctively. Boone did not raise his voice. He did not lecture. He simply spoke. "This is bigger than you," he said. "And it is bigger than her." Derek swallowed. "I was doing my job," he replied weakly. Boone nodded once. "You thought you were," he said. "That is the problem." He paused, choosing his words carefully. When we protect decisions instead of examining them, we teach our people that certainty matters more than truth. Derek looked down. Boone felt the weight of his own role settle fully. The years of looking the other way. The times he told himself it was easier not to rock the boat. Easier to assume his officers knew what they were doing. That assumption had consequences. Outside the room, Evelyn stood and adjusted her coat. She listened as Boone spoke to the liaison about next steps, about cooperation, about accountability. She did not intervene. This was not her process to control. She had never wanted authority for its own sake. She carried responsibility because someone had to. As she prepared to leave, Boone approached her. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "we failed you." Evelyn met his eyes. "You failed the system," she replied calmly. "I just happened to be standing inside it when it showed itself." Boone nodded, unable to argue. As she walked toward the exit, the lesson hung heavy in the air. This had never been about mistaking one person for another. It was about what happened when confidence went unquestioned, when power moved faster than judgment, when a system taught its people that assuming was safer than asking. That combination did not create mistakes. It created disasters. And now everyone involved was finally beginning to understand the difference. The consequences did not fall all at once. They arrived in waves, measured and methodical, carried by official letters, sealed envelopes, and meetings that ended in silence instead of reassurance. There was no dramatic announcement, no single moment where everything collapsed. The damage unfolded the way real consequences always do, slowly enough to feel unreal, fast enough to be unstoppable. Derek Walsh learned he was finished on a Tuesday morning. He sat across from an internal affairs investigator in a small windowless office, his hands folded on the table, his uniform pressed out of habit more than necessity. The questions were calm, precise, uninterested in his intentions. Why did you proceed without supervisor notification? Why did you disregard offered documentation? Why did you escalate without corroboration? Each answer he gave sounded thinner than the last. By the end of the interview, the investigator closed the folder and said nothing. That silence was the verdict. He was placed on indefinite administrative leave by noon. By the end of the week, the termination letter arrived. No ceremony, no appeal worth mentioning, just a formal acknowledgement that his service was over. The badge he had once believed would protect him was returned in an evidence envelope. His name did not appear in the press release. It did not need to. Everyone in the department knew. His reputation unraveled quietly. Former colleagues stopped responding to messages. Friends avoided the subject altogether. The future he had imagined, promotion, stability, respect, evaporated in a matter of days. Derek spent long hours staring at walls, replaying choices he could not undo. The certainty that once fueled him now felt like a weight he could not lift. Across town, the department itself began to fracture. Federal investigators took over offices that had once belonged to command staff. Body camera footage was reviewed frame by frame. Arrest records were pulled. Patterns were examined. What started as a single incident widened into something systemic. Oversight replaced autonomy. Policies were rewritten under supervision. Training sessions were mandated. Supervisors were questioned not about what they did, but about what they allowed. Rumors of dissolution circulated through the halls. Some officers quietly updated resumes. Others waited, hoping the storm would pass. It did not. Chief Boone remained in his office late most nights, reading reports he should have read years ago. Each page felt like an indictment, not just of Derek, of leadership, of silence, of the belief that keeping things smooth mattered more than keeping them right. He understood now that protecting the department had not protected the community. It had endangered it. Evelyn Carter left Oak River without fanfare. There were no interviews, no statements, no victory speeches. She declined every request for comment and returned to her work with the same discipline she had always carried. To her, this was not a triumph. It was an exposure. She felt no satisfaction watching careers fall, no relief in seeing systems corrected under force. What lingered instead was a heavy sadness. The knowledge that accountability always arrived too late for the people it was meant to protect. In quiet moments, she thought about Derek, not with anger, with understanding. He had not woken up intending to destroy his life. He had followed a belief that had been reinforced. Every day he wore the uniform, a belief that confidence was authority and authority was truth. That belief had failed him, and it had failed the system that allowed it to grow unchecked. As the investigations continued and the department's future hung in limbo, one thing became clear to everyone involved. There were no winners here. Not the officer who lost everything, not the department stripped of its autonomy, not the woman who endured it all without raising her voice. The only thing that emerged intact was the truth, and even that came at a cost no one could ignore. The law never spoke loudly about what happened in Oak River. There was no single sentence carved into policy that explained it. No headline that captured the truth cleanly. The law, as it always does, moved on to the next case, the next file, the next quiet failure waiting to be misunderstood. But its echo remained. What the town learned, what the department learned, what Derek Walsh learned too late, was simple and uncomfortable. The law was never meant to protect ego. It was never designed to reward certainty or confidence or the illusion of control. It existed for one reason only: to protect the truth when someone was brave enough to let it. Evelyn Carter understood that more clearly than ever now. She did not leave Oak River feeling stronger or wiser in the way stories often pretend people do. She did not believe suffering had improved her character. What it had done was sharpen her awareness. It stripped away any lingering hope that systems corrected themselves automatically. They did not. They required people who were willing to pause, to question, to resist the comfort of assumptions even when those assumptions felt safe, even when they felt justified. Evelyn returned to her work carrying that knowledge quietly. She spoke less in meetings, but listened more closely. She asked questions others overlooked, not because she doubted people, but because she doubted certainty. That was the change, not becoming better, becoming more awake. Derek Walsh carried a different kind of awakening. Without the badge, without the authority it once lent him, he saw how thin his confidence had always been, how much of it depended on never being questioned, never being slowed down, never being asked to explain himself beyond the surface. The system had not betrayed him. It had trusted him, and he had mistaken that trust for permission. Chief Boone carried the echo as well. In every decision, he replayed the moments he chose silence over responsibility, loyalty over accountability, peace over truth. He learned, painfully, that protecting people from consequences only ensured those consequences would grow larger. None of them emerged as heroes. That was the point. Justice was not a triumph. It was a correction. The lesson did not belong to Oak River alone. It did not belong to one officer or one department. It lived wherever authority went unquestioned and assumptions replaced. Verification. One wrong assumption, when trusted absolutely, could unravel an entire system, not because it was malicious, but because it was confident. And in the end, that was the truth that refused to fade. The badge didn't fail him. His certainty did.